and it'll continue to be so, is more difficult than paper 2. You do realize that, okay? For the simple reason that paper 1 concepts are taught in term 1 only. And paper 2 is taught in terms 2 and term 3. So you've got more time. Do you understand? So what does it tell you? That during terms 2 and term 3, you must constantly revise term 1 work. Now this year, you are writing what is called a mock paper. Paper 2 and paper 1, you are writing as normal examination, but it does not contribute towards your year mark. Do you know that? Now, it not contributing to a year mark does not detract from the fact that it is as important as the final examination. Do you understand that? Because it's a preparatory examination, identifying your areas of weaknesses such that your teachers can identify and address those things there. Now, what I mean by is not going towards a year mark. It's not going to capture an essay SAMs, okay? But treat that as though it is a formal examination so that you can identify your areas of weaknesses and the teachers can help you thereafter. Now, in terms 2 and term 3, the work that you will be doing is in paper 2, okay? Now, generally what happens, I'm going to concentrate on manufacturing for today, okay? Now, I'm going to change the modus operandi that your teachers would normally use. We normally do 1 exercise in the class, do you understand? But here we're going to do 2 activities simultaneously. So we identify the concept and get to understand the concept. Now, I'm going to go to the deep end of this question here. I'm looking at the question paper. This is last year's question paper, paper 2. Okay? Now, in paper 2, I'm looking at question 2.3. 2.3. Okay? Yes. Where's the question paper? It's been passed out? Is it there? Just pass that through, please. Those learners in the back don't have question papers. Okay, we're looking at break-even point. What do you understand by break-even point? I'm going to the deep end, and we'll come to the shallow end just now. What do we understand by break-even point? Now, it's important for you to note the definition. Either you are asked for the definition, or they'll give you multiple choice questions at the beginning of a sub-question, do you understand? And they'll ask you to match column A or column B, and you'll be able to get marks there. Now, while we're going through the activity, I'm going to also give you some exam tips. But you don't practice exam tips in the examination only. You'll do it throughout in your class activity as well. Do you understand? Because you can't start using a new process in the examination. You will not know how. So, what you're going to do is now, in understanding BEP, break-even point, I need for you to understand the definition first, and then you can work through the process. What do you understand by break-even point? Now, remember, we're dealing with manufacturing, okay? We're dealing with manufacturing, which is a company that makes and sells goods. Do you understand? What do you mean by BEP, break-even point? Sorry? Now, there are key words that you must understand. Minimum quantities that must be made and sold. Minimum quantity must be made and sold such that the income you generate from selling will cover all of your costs, thus resulting in neither a profit nor a loss, meaning zero. From all your sales, the income you generate, you'll cover all of your costs. Do you understand? All of your costs, running costs and manufacturing costs, to an extent where you'll make neither profit nor loss, which is zero. Now, anybody getting into business, is that your intention? To break even? No. You want to make a profit. But to make a profit, you need to know what is the minimum quantity that you must make, and you got to make beyond that to make a profit. Do you understand? So let's look at the formula. Do you know the formula for break-even point? Right, your BEP. is your total fixed cost. TFC, total fixed cost, divided by contribution. What do we mean by contribution? How do we calculate contribution? Contribution is selling price per unit, subtract your total variable cost per unit. Your total fixed cost, now remember here it's total fixed cost, not per unit, total fixed cost, divided by contributions. How do you work at contribution? Selling price per unit minus or subtract your variable cost per unit. Okay, now in this example here, they have already calculated the BEP. Can you see that there? If you look at the bottom end of the question on the information, it says break-even point, which I've highlighted, is 3,556 units. Okay? Now let's calculate that. Now the question here reads 2.3.1, provide a calculation to confirm that the break-even point for 2021 financial year is correct. Okay? Now, at school level up to now, what I'm going to do on the board is what we have been doing, and it has been accepted as correct. But going forward, that may not necessarily be correct, because I'll show you the new method of calculating the answer for 2.3.1. Now let's substitute total fixed cost per unit. Sorry, total fixed cost. Can you see, if you look at the information, can you see fixed cost there, 224,000 Rand. Can you see that? Right, under December 31st, the first column, fixed cost is 224,000. So your fixed cost is 224,000 Rands over selling price per unit. Now, what you must understand, ladies and gentlemen, that in the question paper, they may not give you selling price per unit as is given in this question here. Sometimes they'll give you the total sales, and they'll tell you the total number of units sold. Do you understand what I'm getting at? They'll give you total sales and the total number of units sold. So you take your total sales and you divide by total number of units sold. That'll give you a selling price per unit. Do you understand how to calculate? Remember, I'm trying to do two activities here simultaneously so that you can see the same concept and how it's tested in different questions. Do you understand? So, in future questions, they may give you the total sales and they'll give you the number of units sold. But what do we need? We need here selling price per unit. So you can calculate selling price per unit by dividing total sales by number of units sold. Are we clear on that there? Right, but in this case here, can you see it says selling price per unit, 255 Rands? Okay, so it is 255 Rands less total variable cost per unit. Now, in this case here, you can see it's given as 192 Rand. Can you see that there? But in other cases, they may not give you the total, but they'll give you individual direct materials cost per unit, direct labor cost, and direct, selling and distribution cost per unit. But in this case, 192 Rands. So you subtract 192 Rands, 192, okay? Right, do the calculation then. What's the answer? 3,556. What? Are there any decimals? What's it? Comma? 5, 6. Okay? Now remember, you cannot sell 0.56 of a unit. Do you understand that? 0.56 means that product is not yet completed. So therefore you cannot sell that 0.56. Now mathematically you would argue, make this 3,557 mathematically, am I right? But look at the logic behind this. Can you convert it to 57? No. Because it's a unit still being produced. Do you understand that? Now you got to understand maths and logic here, right? Mathematically speaking, rounding off, you say 57 because it's more than half, isn't it so? But practically speaking, Can you sell a product that's not yet completed? No. So even if it's 0.95, mathematically it'll convert to the next whole, am I right? But here you will not convert the next whole because that part of a product, however much completed, it's still not completed. Therefore, it will be 3,556 units. Okay? Now, what have I done? This is what is accepted at this point in time to answer question 2.3.1. 2.3.1, that is what is accepted in this case here, but it's also the same formula for BEP, break-even point. Okay? Now, is the contribution 63 here? 255. Okay? Now, there's another question that does not appear here, but it could appear. It does appear in other questions as well. What is the purpose of opening any business? What is the purpose of any business? To make a profit. But what are we doing here? We are breaking even. Is that what we want to do? Is that what we want to do? No. So we want to make a profit, isn't it so? So the curveball would be, we'll change this question and ask another question. It's not here. If the company wants to make a profit of 30,000 rands, if the company makes make a profit of 30,000 rands, how many, now pay very careful attention to what I'm going to ask you. If the company wants to make a profit of 30,000 rands, how many units must they make and sell? Or how many units must they make? Listen to that question very carefully. If the company wants to make 30,000 rands profit, how many units must they make? Now I'm going to rephrase the question and understand the difference. If the company wants to make a profit of 30,000 rands, how many additional units must they make? Can you see the difference in the question? One is asking you, if they want to make a profit of 30,000 rands, how many units must they make? As opposed to, if the company wants to make a profit of 30,000 rands, how many additional units do they need to make? Do you know the formula for that? Depending on what the question is. Remember, I said I gave you two scenarios, do you understand? Let's, for argument's sake, say the first question is, how many units must they make to make a profit of 30,000 rands? How many units must they make to make a profit of 30,000 rands? Do you understand? Right. The simple modification to this formula is this. All you do is plus profit. And the formula is now going to give you the answer. So, what we're saying here now is plus 30,000, am I right? So you now add 224,000 plus 30,000 divided by 63. You need to be taking down, you need to be writing, you can't be understanding accounting, you've got to apply it. So this is now, remember the question is, you need to make a profit of 30,000 rands. How many units need you make? So the same formula, you just add 30,000, which is a profit, and divide by 60. The same, everything else remains the same. What's the quantity now? 4,031. You got a decimal? What's the decimal? 75. So it'll be 4,031. Because you can't point 0.7. You can't sell 0.7, do you understand? But always remember, in as much as the question may say to one decimal point, whatever your calculator gives you, you fill it in first and then round. Do you understand that? Okay? Fill in what your calculator gives you and then round down or round up, in which most cases will be rounding down. So can you see now, if you want to break even, you need to make 3,556 units. Whereas if you want to make a profit of 30,000, and all you do is just add 30,000 into it and say 4,031. Now that answers the first question I posed, where I'm asking, if the company wants to make a profit of 30,000 rands, how many units do we need to produce? If the question was how many additional, if the question is how many additional, then there's two ways of doing this. First one is you do this first calculation, do you understand? Then you do the next calculation, and 4,031 less 3,556, do you understand? So it's 4,031 minus 3,556. Sorry? 476. No, we just take round, remember we take round figures. 476 units. Now remember, if the question was how many units must we make and sell to make a profit of 30,000 rands, then you'll do the modification of this unit, this formula by just adding 30,000, the profit in this case, and it's 4,031 units. But if the question asks you for additional, if they say how many additional units, then you got to do one of two ways. The first way is you calculate this, which is 3,556, and then you calculate with profit giving you 4,031, and you take 4,031, you'll subtract the 3,556, and that gives you 476. Are we clear on that there? Now, of course, accounting is one subject, and you can correct me if I'm wrong. As you read the transaction, you have no time to think of the answer. Do you realize that? As you're reading the transaction, the answer must start flowing through to you. Unlike other subjects. And why is that? Maths, with due respect to maths and physics, you got 6 hours to earn 300 marks. Accounting, you got 4 hours to earn the same 300 marks. Can you see? You got 2 hours less. Which means as you read the transaction, you must be able to start formulating your answers. Now, what am I getting at? This is a long method, isn't it so? Now remember, I'm emphasizing this. If the question is how many additional units you need to make, then there's a shortcut. If they're asking only for additional, then you take a profit divided by your contribution. What's your profit you're requiring? 30,000, am I right? Your contribution is 63. What's the answer? 476. Did you understand that? Now, please understand the question. If the question asks just additional, how many additional units you need to make, there's a shortcut. Profit over contribution, and then answer. Can you see 476 and 476? So you save time. But if the question asks you how many units must they make and sell so that they can make a profit of 20,000, 30,000, or however many thousands, all you do is take your BEP and say add your profit. Okay, are we clear on that there? Okay, now let's look at this question 2.3 again. It says provide a calculation to confirm. Now I did mention to you that this method will be accepted this year, and I'm not going to confuse you with what's going to happen going forward for next year. So for next year, we'll orientate our teachers to show you the new method, but it has nothing to do with this year. You can still use this method here, and you'll get your full marks. Do you understand? Right. The other thing you must remember, in question 1, paper 1 and paper 2, there'll be a formula sheet here, isn't it so? The formula sheet is just a hoax. It's a lie. Do you know why? It's got no names on it. If it's got no names, it means you must memorize. Isn't that so? But what it does, it will trigger your memory. So you still got to look at your formula sheet and write down the headings. But also we've observed, right under the headings, that you cannot memorize the headings in sequence. Because I've observed that what they do in each exam, they change the order of those, the formulas. So you can't memorize, okay, the first one is current ratio, second one is asset test. You can't memorize that. Do you understand? You got to know what the formula is. So this will just trigger your memory. Okay. So this formula here, profit over contribution, is not in the formula sheet. Yes?
So where did you get the 63 rands?
63 rands is your total, your selling price per unit, subtract your total variable cost per unit. Now, total variable cost per unit is your direct materials cost, direct labor cost per unit, and selling and distribution cost per unit. And you'll see it there, 192. So it is selling price per unit minus your variable cost per unit. Okay? Are we done with that there? Okay, looking at the next question, explain why Rosemary is pleased with the production level, sales, and break-even point. Quote, figures. Now, you look at the mark scheme 4, okay? Now, sometimes when we're doing memo discussion, then we realize there's something else they're asking for, something hidden. Okay, let's look at it now. Why is Rosemary, she's the owner, pleased with the production level? Let's look at now, the break-even point is 3,556. What did I tell you that is? That's a minimum quantity, isn't that so? That you must produce and sell so that you break even, meaning you make neither profit nor loss. And what I've shown you in this calculation here, anything more than this means you're making a profit. And the greater the difference between BEP and actual production, the greater the difference, the greater the profit, isn't that so? That makes sense? Now, I've shown you here, if I want to make a profit of 30,000, can you see I'm producing 4,031 units, can you see, as opposed to 3,556. So the more produced from BEP, the greater the profit margin, okay? So let's look at here now. Let's look at the actual production, 4,900 units, am I right? Actual production, 4,900 units. But how many were we supposed to have produced to break even? 3,556. So what does that mean? Make a profit. Don't just say we're making a profit. You're not going to get full marks for that there. You're going to say that the company has produced 4,900 units, which is more than or greater than your BEP of 3,556, thus resulting in a profit. You've got to give a full answer, do you understand, to get your full marks. So you've got to show the comparison. So what's happening here? The company has produced 4,900 units, which is more than the BEP, they'll accept BEP as an abbreviation, do you understand? Which is more than the BEP of 3,556, thus resulting in a profit. You must culminate, you must finish with saying resulting in a profit. Okay? Sales and break-even point. So you can see your production level, we spoke of, am I right? We spoke of production because 4,900 units, am I right? That's production level. BEP, 3,556, you can see that? You made and sold. Now, that's one part of the answer. But also you got to look at what's called a trend. Trend means you either compare last year to this year, or this company to another company. Do you understand? You either compare this company, last year's performance to this year's performance, or this company to another company altogether. Now, they don't give you another company, obviously. Do you understand? So you look at last year. What was the production last year? 4,000 units. Isn't that so? What happened to the level of production? Can you see it's increased? But why should she, maybe I'm answering the next question just now. Okay? Can you see the increase from 4,000 units to 4,900 units? So that is why she's also happy, isn't it so? Not only did she produce more, she actually sold more as well. Okay? So you can also state there that the production from 2020 increased from 4,000 units to 4,900 units. Okay? Explain to Rosemary why the fixed cost per unit decreased from 56 to 45 rands. That is answering another question called economies of scale. Have you heard of the term economies of scale? Something yes, something no. They are from different schools. Same school. Okay, maybe you got different teachers. Okay, same teacher, I'll say. Look, I'm not casting any aspersion. I'm just wanting to establish why someone is saying yes. Maybe you were present in school, and those that were saying no, absent. But be that as it may, what do you understand by economies of scale? What do you understand by economies of scale? Sorry? Cost decrease, okay. Now, Economies of scale means as a level of production increases, your total cost per unit, now remember, these are the terminology we're looking for. The total cost per unit decreases. As the level of production increases, the total cost of production per unit begins to decrease. Okay? Now, how do we explain that? I'm just going to make you understand this, okay? If I hire this premises here as my manufacturing plant, and they're charging me 10,000 a month rent, in the first month, I do not produce anything. Do I owe the church 10,000 rent? Yes. In the second month, if I produce only 1 unit, do I owe the, how much do I owe the church now? Still 10,000 rands. So which means the entire 10,000 must be cost to the 1 unit, am I right? If in the third month I produce only 2 units, how much am I going to pay the church in the third month? Still 10,000, but how many units have I produced? 2. So if I divide 10,000 by 2, now it becomes 5,000 per unit. And subsequent months, I will produce 4 units. How much am I going to pay the church? 10,000. 10,000 divided by 4 is 2,500 per unit. Can you see? If I produce 10 units in the next month, then it becomes 1,000 rands per unit. What's happening? The rent remains constant, isn't it so? But the number of units is increasing. So the cost per unit begins to decrease as the number of units produced begins to increase. Now, that is based on what is called fixed costs. Because remember, the rent is fixed cost. So that will bring me back to the start of this lesson. We have 5 cost centers. Do you know that? What are the 5 costs? Direct materials cost, direct labor cost, not indirect, factory overhead costs, admin costs, and selling and distribution. Now your factory overhead costs and admin costs for school level, remember this is emphasis for school level, remains constant, fixed cost in other words. Meaning it does not change with the level of production. So the definition of fixed cost is does not change the level of production. Right. So now the question is this. Explain to Rosemary why the fixed cost per unit decreased from 56 rands to 45.71. Now, where do we find that there? Look at your fixed cost. December 31st, 2020, it was 56, and you can see that there? And look at December 31st on the 2021, it's 45.71. What are we looking at? Fixed cost decrease, am I right? I just explained now the answer. So what is the answer then? Explain to Mary why your fixed cost per unit decreased. Sorry? You're still not going to get full marks. You see, this is where you know the answers, but because you're not giving in its entirety, you're losing marks. In 2020, you see, you're forgetting the year. It was 4,000, and it has increased to 4,900 in 2021, but is that all? Look at now the fixed cost. What is the fixed cost in 2020? Fixed cost, listen to the question, is 224,000. Fixed, I didn't say fixed cost per unit. I asked you the fixed cost, do you understand? Fixed cost is 224,000, and this is 224,000. Can you see that there? So while the level of production increased from 4,000 in 2020 to 4,900 in 2021, the fixed cost remained the same, thus resulting in fixed cost per unit decreasing. Can you see that there? Okay. Rosemary made deliberate decisions regarding variable costs to improve the business. Explain the decisions that she might have taken on these costs and how these costs had a positive effects on the business, quote, figures. Now, you see the question is directing you to the answer, do you understand? It's asking you here, she's made decisions regarding variable costs. Fortunately, in this example here, all your variable costs are listed one below the other. Your direct materials cost, direct labor cost, and selling and distribution cost. Look at your costs. It says there, Rosemary has made deliberate decisions regarding variable costs to improve the business. Explain the decision that she might have taken on these costs. Okay? Now, and how this could have had a positive effect on the business, quote figures. Can you see a direct labor cost? Now, you've got to look at which costs, what the question is asking you here, how has it had a positive effect? Do you understand? Now, positive effect, now remember, if you're minimizing your costs, that is a positive effect. If your costs are increasing, that can't be a positive effect. Do you understand? So you've got to be very selective in what you're talking about. For example, if you look at direct materials cost, it was 320,000 rands. Can you see that? It went to 490,000 rands. So you can't use that to validate your answer. Do you understand? Let's look at direct labor cost, 288 to 274. That has improved, isn't it so? 96 to 76, 176. Now, if you look at the unit costs as well, in 2020, your direct material is 80 to 100 rands, 72 to 56 for direct labor, and 24 to 36. Can you see your direct labor is the only one that decreased, am I right? So, it says, explain the decision she might have taken on these costs and how these costs have had positive effects on the business, quote, figures. So, we talk of variables, basically talking only one there, am I right? Which is what? Direct labor cost, we're talking about at this point in time. Looking at the unit costs there, you can see it decreased. How do you think it would have decreased? So your direct labor cost decreased from 288,000, which is 72 rands per unit, to 274, which is 56 rands per unit. Okay, can you see the trend we're talking of there now? What do you think would have improved? How do you think she's improved it such that it became cheaper? Please don't use the words like using foreigners as employees there. That's asking for trouble, okay? Because it means you have to lay off South Africans to bring in foreign nationals, you understand? That's not what we're looking for. So how do you think it will improved? Look at what I'm using and look at what the prof used. And what Dr. Kripanandan used. You remember they used technology, okay? They used improved technology, they didn't have to hold paper in their hand, do you understand? Okay? So what am I saying? Improved machinery, which will improve technologies. If you improve your technology, what happens? The time taken to produce an item will be shortened, isn't that so? So if you shorten the time, the cost will decrease. So improved machinery, improved technologies will result in improved labor. Okay, that's one. What else? What about, consider the fact that you are benefiting from this program for maths, physics, and accounting. We are hoping that that will impact on your results being improved, am I right? How is it improving? Because it's coming for tuition, am I right? So what do you think the company does for the employees? Skills development. So if you engage the employees in skills development, then obviously if they become more skillful, they'll be able to produce the products quicker, am I right? If you had to employ somebody first time, he or she will take this one table, it might take him 4 hours to make one table. But with constant improvement in his skills, from 4 hours, it might take him only 2 hours. So if you're paying him 100 an hour, the first table will cost 400. Subsequent tables will become cheaper and cheaper until it comes to 200 an hour. You understand? Because it's 200 per table, because it's now from 4 hours, it comes down to 2 hours. So improved skills or skills development would have improved the skills of the employees, thus translating to improved production, therefore labor cost decreases. Okay. Right, let's get back to the questions here. I'm looking at 2.2, I'm going backwards. You'll understand why. These are the more tricky questions that they ask you to engage in. And learners tend to have difficulty in grasping these concepts, you know, right? Here, control of raw materials. After completing the statements in question 2.1, we'll go back to this. Now, the internal auditor of Prudy Manufacturer suspects that raw materials, fabric is not being controlled well in the storeroom and the factory. Calculate the meters of fabric missing from the storeroom. Calculate Why am I dealing with the tail end of the question? Because remember what Prof said, is human nature to take the easier route, am I right? So you'll start with the question at the beginning. And when it comes to this part, you say you got no time. But this way you can score more marks as well, do you understand? And many of you do not understand this more difficult aspect of this question. Calculate the meter of fabric missing from the storeroom, calculate the meter of fabric wasted in the factory. So let's look at storeroom. Now, in manufacturing, you got 3 stock accounts. You got 3 stock accounts. You got raw material stock, okay? You got work in progress stock, and you got finished goods stock. Now, what are they asking you here for? They're asking for materials, the fabric missing from the storeroom, meaning we're talking of raw materials, do you understand? Not finished goods. So you got to identify what they're talking about. So let's look at your raw materials. Your balance, you had 2,700 meters, am I right? That's your opening stock, 2,700 meters. How much did you purchase for the year? 10,800. So your purchases, 10,800. So you got 13,500 available, meters now, remember? Now, if there was any fabric that is returned, do you understand? If there was fabric returned, are you with me thus far? So you'll say returns, and then you will subtract that. Do you understand that part? Okay, I'm going beyond this activity. If there were any returns, okay, you'll deduct the returns and your available will still, in this case, be 13,500 meters. You with me thus far? Okay. Now, look at the top. Raw materials, fabric used in production is issued to the factory from the storeroom as required. The record of fabric is as follows. Raw materials issued to the factory. Can you see that? Raw materials issued to factory. So issued now. How much did he issue? 12,450. So what should your stock be left now in terms of available stock? 1,050 meters, am I right? According to your mathematical calculations, you ought to have 1,050 meters of stock left. Are we clear on that there? Okay? Look at your final stock though. Final stock, 850 units. 850 units. So what's the answer then? Sorry? 200 units, 200 meters. So that's your meterage that's stolen. Can you see how simple it is? But many learners tend not to answer these questions. Okay? You take your opening stock, subtract your purchases, you add your purchases, you'll subtract any returns, that'll give you available, subtract what has been issued to the factory, and that will be giving what you should have. In this case, 1,050 meters. But according to your final stock sheets, you got 850 meters, so which means 200 meters has now been stolen. Okay? Right, let's look at the next question. Or any question on this point here? Right, next one is asking you the meter of fabric wasted in the factory. Now, before we go any further, remember here, the question is asking you to calculate the meters of fabric stolen. Do you understand? They're asking you to calculate the meterage of fabric stolen. But if I change the question and say, what's the value of stock that were stolen? What would you do now? Can you see, it says, information B, fabric is purchased at a fixed cost of 120 rands per meter, isn't that so? So you take 200 meters, multiplied by 120 rands. Do you understand the difference in the question? In this question, they're asking for meterage of stock that was stolen. But if I change the question and ask for a rand value, say, look, how much of loss, or what loss did the company sustain from fabric being stolen? You'll still calculate this, and then all you do is multiply by, in this case here, 120 rands. Do you understand? That's the answer will be for, it'll give a rand value then. Okay? Now, the next question, the meters of fabric wasted in the factory. Wastage. Now we talk of wastage. Now talk of wastage. How much of material we issued to the factory? 12,450 meters. Okay? Look at additional information. B, it takes 1.5 meters of fabric to make one travel bag. There's two ways of working this out. How many travel bags have they made? 7,000? 7,800. They've made 7,800 bags, isn't that so? And it takes 1.5 meters per bag. Multiply that there. 7,800 meters, 7,800 bags multiplied by 1.5 meters. 11,000? 700, exactly. Okay, so in other words, we ought to have used only 11,700 meters of fabric, isn't that so? But how much was issued to the factory? 12,450. So 11,700, okay? 750 meters is wasted. Now again, if they had to ask you the rand value, the monetary value of loss, you multiply that by 120 rands. And that is answering 2.2.2. Can you see that there? Calculate the total cost of fabric lost. There's it, yeah? Multiply this by 120 rand and multiply this by 120 rand. Do you understand? And that answers 2.2.2. And explain how these costs, how this loss should be shown in the statements mentioned in 2.1. In 2.1 now, that is your production cost statement in the abridged financial statement. Are you with me thus far? Now, I've actually answered 2.2.2 by simply saying multiply this by 120 rand, multiply this by 120 rand, and add the two. Do you understand? You've got to add the two again, and that will give you the final answer of wastage in terms of rand value. Now, the next question is asking you now to tell us how it will be shown in the financial statements mentioned in question 2.1. Let's look at 2.1. 2.1 is asking you to produce a production cost statement, the production cost statement and the abridged financial statement. Can you see that there? Abridged statement of comprehensive income. Now these losses here will not be shown in the production cost statement, do you understand? It will be shown in the abridged statement of comprehensive income. It will be shown as expenses. I'm answering that question there again now. How will it be shown? It will be shown as expenses, loss through theft, loss through wastage. Can you see that? Remember, just think about the other parts that you dealt with in companies. Remember you did loss through flood, loss through fire, loss through theft. Do you remember? Same thing applies here as well. So you say loss through theft or loss through wastage in the statement of comprehensive income. So what they're testing you there, they're testing you as to know whether you know your accounting. That cannot go into the production cost statement, do you understand? It'll go into the income statement, which is your abridged statement of comprehensive income. So that will go as loss through theft and loss through wastage. That will go into your statement of comprehensive income. Okay. Okay, what I want you to do now is we're going to open to page 96 of this book here, and we're going to look at this question paper as well. Okay, we're looking at both aspects, so we can see how we're going to work through these things here. Okay. Now, this is one of the easier questions. When I say easier question, don't misunderstand that to be an easy question. You understand? Easier in comparison to companies. You get it? I'm not in any way suggesting it's easy. I'm just saying it's easier to score marks here. Okay? The other tip that what you must understand is this. I've been asking my teachers to tell me how many learners did not complete paper 1. How many of you didn't complete paper 1? That's bad. Now, when I ask you did not complete, there's one of two ways we talk of incomplete. I think there were 4 questions, am I right? Were there 4 questions? Now, incomplete could mean that some of you have completed the first 3 questions and did not complete the 4th question at all. Then the others would have done all 4 questions, but did not complete in every aspect. I would rather you be in the second scenario where you do attempt all questions, even if it's 80% level. The reason for that is every paper, every question is set on what is called the cognitive domains. Lower level 30%, average 40%, and top end 30%, meaning the top end 30% are for those A candidates. You with me on that day? It does not mean that you can't attempt that day. It simply means that because of you working slower than the A candidates, you may not be able to get the top end marks. Do you understand? So every question is based on 30, 40, 30. Now imagine if you did not do question 4 at all. Then the 30, 40, the 70, you understand? Marks that you could have earned, you've lost completely. Reason being, in question 1, 2, and 3, you are attempting the top 30%, which is designed for the A candidate. I'm not suggesting you're not an A candidate. I'm saying to you, we've got to understand our limitations as well. Do you understand? So if you are a candidate who's going to score like your 60s and 70s, then the top 30 may not necessarily be where you are. So instead of wasting time trying to scratch your head and other parts of your anatomy, looking for the answers, move on to the next question, move on to the next adjustment, move on to the next transaction, you understand? Such that you complete every question, not complete, attempt every question. Now remember, the start of the question does not mean that will be the 30% and then going down 40%, no. It's thrown all over, do you understand? The very first question in a question could be the most difficult one. So if you don't know that, move to the next one. Are you with me on that there? So now let's look at this difference here now. In both cases, they're asking you, looking at question 2.1, prepare the production cost statement on 20th of Feb 2020, and here too they're asking for the production cost statement. You can see that there. But you'll see how different they are. But remember your production cost statement. I've mentioned to you there are 5 costs, remember? Direct materials, direct labor, and selling and distribution are called variable costs. Your admin costs and factory overhead costs are called your fixed costs, right? Now in your production cost, direct materials cost, direct labor cost. Okay? Now let's look at the question paper. Now when you're looking at the question paper, also look at the answer material. Because there's a tendency for us looking at the question paper and what am I looking for? I'm looking for direct materials cost, am I right? So I'm looking at the question paper and I'm not seeing the direct materials cost. And what do? I look all over and look again because I could have omitted or overlooked it, am I right? But if you look at the answer material, it's already populated. Do you understand? So you're not wasting time in looking for information which is already there. Right? So direct material is done. Direct labor. Let's look at direct labor. Now, it says here, in terms of direct labor, production wage. Can you see that there? Now, what you must understand, you spoke of earlier, spoke of indirect labor. Now, direct labor is this, are people who are actually physically involved with actual production. I could be sweeping the factory floor. Although I'm in the factory, I'm sweeping the factory floor, that labor for the cleaner is not direct labor. Do you understand that? It is part of your indirect labor cost, which goes part of your factory overhead costs. I'm the supervisor. I'm checking your work. I come here, I say, hang on, you're doing something wrong. I attend to you what you are doing wrong, showing the right way, and I move off. My wage, I'm a supervisor. Is that part of direct labor? No. Because my job is just to supervise you, not to do the work. I'm only showing you how to correct it, but I move away from you. So the supervisor's wage, the factory cleaner's wage, you could have a production manager or a production director who's sitting in head office in Johannesburg or Cape Town. He or she is also involved with production, am I right? But is he or she directly involved with production? No. So that will also go part of your indirect, which is part of your factory overhead costs. Okay, that said, now let's look at your adjustment C or item C, production wage. Net wage is 647,400. That's net wage. 647,400. Now, you got to do a lot of reflexive learning. Reflexive learning means what you've been taught in another section or maybe in another subject, you can bring it and apply it here. Now, I don't know if you remember what your teacher taught you about income tax. You know the statement of income, comprehensive income statement? You get your net profit before tax, am I right? Net profit before tax, income tax, and your net profit after tax. Always remember, your net profit before tax is always 100%. Isn't that so? And if this is 28, this is therefore 72. So what may happen, they might give you this amount. So you can see now, this amount equals 28%. Can you see that there? Like that here, they're telling you your total deduction is 22% of gross wage. This is net, isn't that so? This is deductions. This is your gross wage. Gross wage is 100%. Isn't that so? What is your deductions? 22. So what does this leave you with? 70. Can you see the reflexive knowledge where you're drawing from companies? Can you see that there? In as much as you can say your teacher hasn't taught you, he has taught that in companies. So you use the same method over here as well. Okay? Now, this is 78%. So which means you divide this by 78 multiplied by 100. Are we clear on that there? Right? Do that. 130,000. Oh, 830,000. Okay? That is the answer, 830,000. Now, of course, how do you show that in the answer material? The other issue is, ladies and gentlemen, whatever calculations you do in the examination, or even your tests in class, do not do the calculations on the question paper. What do you submit for marking? The answer sheet. Do you understand? Always do the calculation on the answer material. Because if you don't have time, you just put an arrow there, the teacher will have to follow the arrow and mark it. Part marks. Remember we talk of part marks, method marks, to show a calculation. Do you understand? So do not show any calculations in the question paper because the question paper is not submitted for marking. All calculations on the answer material only. Somewhere you'll find some space on the answer material. You'll notice the answer materials are always very spacious. Look at this. Plenty of space, am I right? This is a direct photocopy of the answer material from the exam. Look at how much space here. You got plenty of space in the marginal, isn't that so? So if you need more space, use that answer material. Now, how would you show this? You got direct labor cost. You say 647,400 times 100 over 70. Isn't that so? Not 78. 78%. That's what you're going to do. Okay, so you got to 830,000. Now, wasn't the direct labor already given to you? Can you see that? 1,494,000. And that gives you what's called your prime cost. Now, see how easy this mark is. Now, invariably, this is a method mark, invariably. Because you get this answer here wrong, we can have a problem. Do you understand? Okay? Right. Look at question G2 in this book here. Can you see direct labor cost? It's got a question mark. Can you see that there? Now, invariably, if it's a question mark, it means you must use some other method of calculating this here, either working backwards, using a ratio, like in your financial statement, they give the debt equity ratio, they give the current ratio, you understand? You must use the ratios to move backwards, or you go to work backwards from other subtotals. So if you look at the answer material here, which is on the next page there, direct materials cost, direct labor cost, prime cost, and carrying on there, okay? The direct labor cost is not given, and if you read the transaction all over, calculate the break-even point, should the business be satisfied, should the business, can you see it's not talking direct labor cost, am I right? So that means there's something here that we haven't really worked through. But look at the bottom. The business produced and sold 4,100 irons for the year ended 28th Feb 2020. The following information was extracted from the books. They're giving you all the other information there. Now, what it says here, if you look at information B, the following was extracted from the financial records of Lifebuoy soap manufacturers, admin costs, direct materials costs, factory overhead costs, okay, selling and distribution costs, direct labor costs is question mark, sales and cost of sales. Now, the direct labor cost is not given, isn't that so? So how do you work at the direct labor cost? Which means basically you got to complete your production cost statement. When I say completed, meaning you go to the bottom and you work upwards. Now let's see how this works. Now this is, remember, the first example you're dealing with, okay? Should have opened this more. Right, for the next question, we're looking at your direct materials cost given, am I right? Direct labor cost. Now, if you look at this here, your direct materials cost is given 1,770,000, isn't that so? 1,770,000. Direct labor cost, you add that, what does it give you? Prime cost, isn't that so? It gives you prime cost. But can we get prime cost figure here? Can we get that? No. Because remember, you can add this figure, am I right? You can add that there. We leave that, move on to what? Factory overhead costs. Now, what it says here, additional information, factory cleaning materials costing 10,000 Rand was erroneously included in the direct materials cost. My stupidity, you see, I didn't read the adjustments. So which means your direct materials cost must actually be 1,760,000. Erroneously, inadvertently, means by mistake, in error. Okay, you must understand your synonyms as well. Remember in grade 12, and they are loading the language according to grade 12 requirement. In as much as many of us are second language speakers, but that does not affect the examiners. They can use the words erroneously, inadvertently, you must know what it means, okay? Which in this case means in error. So it says factory cleaning materials costing 10,000 was erroneously included in the direct materials cost. Correct the error. So here, you must show the calculation, do you understand? 1,770,000 minus your 10,000, so you can get your part marks, okay? In your factory overhead costs, open bracket, 327,000 plus your 10,000 is 328,000. Then you got your cost of production. Can we get this figure here? Can we get that figure? No. Sorry? 337, sorry. 337. Okay? Now, cost of production. Your direct materials plus direct labor giving you prime cost plus your factory overhead cost giving you cost of production. But that too we cannot get a total for because we don't have direct labor cost. What is work in progress? Work that we have, sorry? So, still in process, unfinished, incomplete, isn't that so? Now think about it very carefully. You got two work in progress stock. Can you see that? You got opening balance and your closing balance. So you're going to have your work in progress stock here. Which one? If today we started making a table and did not complete it, when you come back tomorrow, which is a new day, which could be a new year, what are we going to start with? We're going to start with what we didn't finish yesterday, isn't that so? What we didn't finish yesterday is what we didn't finish last year. So your work in progress stock at the beginning is end of last year. Do you understand? End of last year. And how much is that? 37,600. 37,600. You get another total there, which we can't get it. Then, what we are trying to work out is, what's the total cost of production of finished goods, isn't that so? So that will now bring us to total cost of production. We don't have that either, am I right? So what do we do now? I mentioned to you there are three stock accounts, am I right? Raw material stock, work in progress stock, and finished goods. Now, raw materials, it could be on the far right. I'm just giving you a flow diagram. This could be the factory where the production takes place, and there will be the finished goods. Which goods are we going to sell? Finished goods. So in other words, your finished goods stock account is what we need to look at now. Finished goods stock, which is the same thing as your trading stock. Why don't we call it trading stock? Why don't we call it trading stock? Trading means buying and selling. We're not buying and selling finished goods. Isn't that so? We're not buying and selling raw materials. We are buying raw materials, converting that and making it finished goods, and the finished goods is what we are selling. So in a manufacturing concern, you have finished goods stock, which is equivalent to trading stock. Now you'll understand why I'm showing you the equivalence of. Okay? When you sell goods, there's two prices, am I right? Your selling price and your cost price. For your selling price, you debit bank or debtors control, am I right? And you credit sales. That's for the selling price. For the cost price, you debit cost of sales and you credit trading stock. I spoke to you of reflexive learning. Do you understand? Reflexive learning, meaning you've learned the section somewhere else. Use that knowledge in the context it's required. So, there's a sales made of two prices, selling price and your cost price. Your selling price, debit bank or debtors control. Bank if it's cash, credit for debtors control, and credit sales. Your cost price, debit cost of sales and credit trading stock. Can you see that there? For the cost price, which is same thing as cost of sales. Do you understand that? Cost price, cost of goods that were sold. You debit cost of sales and credit trading stock. Now, can you see here, they've given you a cost of sales figure of 3,337,000. Can you see that there? But before that, if you look at information A, you got your finished goods stock at the beginning of the year, which is end of last year, 127,000. That will be your balance brought down on this side, am I right? 127,000, 127,000. Then it says cost of sales. Now remember I said to you, cost of sales, cost price. What do? Debit cost of sales and credit trading stock. But we do not have a trading stock account here. We have what's called finished goods stock. Now do you understand the relationship there? So you credit finished goods stock and saying cost of sales with how much? 3,337,000. And then it says to you that you've got finished goods unsold at the end of the year of 315,000. Isn't that so? That is now your balance carried down 315,000. Okay. Now, for the account to balance off, your totals on both sides must equal, isn't that so? But can you see here now, that's 127,000. Remember, for the total to equal, it means whichever side total is the greater is what should be brought down. That's 127,000, and this is now 3,600,000 and something. Can you see that there? So 0, 0, 0, 7, 12, carry 1, 4, 5, 6. 3,652,000. Sorry, 5 minutes. Okay. So you get 3,652,000, 3,652,000 rands. What does it mean? This is stock that you had from last year that was not sold. Isn't that so? This was the stock you got at the end of this year that's not sold. But this is the cost of goods that were sold. So which means whatever is over here is what you've made for this year. So that is now your WIPs, your work in progress stock, and the difference then is 25,000. That you bring down here, 3,525,000 rands. Okay? You got your WIPs at the end of the year is 84,600. 84,600. This will be bracketed, reason being, why are we bracketing this here? What we're doing is this. From all the production process, these goods, 84,600, it's been started, but have we completed it as yet? No. Because we haven't completed, we must deduct it from the whole process to find out what we have produced. Do you understand? Now, to work backwards, what do we do? What do we do to work backwards? Take your signs. Remember, this was adding, that's adding, this is adding also, am I right? So when you reverse this now, you change the signs, okay? This is subtracted. So what do you do here now? Add the two, give me a figure there. $609,000. You added, am I right? Now to have achieved this figure here, you had to have X plus that giving this, am I right? So moving upwards now, change the operator. So you subtract this minus the 37,600. Sorry? 3,572,000. To have arrived at this figure here, you add this figure, am I right? So moving backwards, you will subtract that. 3 million. You see, Josephine? How confusing this is? Okay, 3,235,000. Okay? Now, this, subtract that, will give you this figure here, which is your direct labor cost. Which is what? 1,475,000. Can you see how differently we work direct materials cost? Direct labor cost. Now, there's yet another way they can give you direct labor cost. They can tell you it takes so many hours to make 1 unit. Do you understand? They can say it takes 10 hours, let's say 4 hours to make 1 unit. And they produce 40,000 units. So 4 times 40,000 units at 10 rand a unit, 10 rand an hour, times 10. You understand? So you multiply quantity by number of hours by rate per hour. That's another way of working direct labor cost. So these are the way the challenges are. Okay, any questions? I'm guided by time here. Okay. Can you see? I started at the end because generally speaking what happens is we tend not to have enough time to complete the more difficult aspects. Do you understand? So we move from the more difficult aspects, which is the more analysis and interpretation, and moved up to the easier one, easy aspect. This part here is the easy aspect there. Now, of course, factory overhead costs, if we meet again, no, you won't be, because you're going to be writing on Monday. Okay? So, all I can say is good luck to you. Okay? You need it. Now, remember something else. I'm saying this in church. I'm saying this in church. You can stand at the altar, your father can be a pastor, and pray every day. It's not going to help you. You have to study. And prayer will only help you remember. So remember when God said, you know, God, please let me win the lotto. Please let me win the lotto. God says, go and buy the ticket first. So remember what your Bible says, God helps those who? Thank you. So you need to revise. Thank you. Good luck, boys and girls. Thank you. Thank you, sir.
Okay, boys and girls, thank you, Dr. Rajan. He's given his time. We appreciate. Come on, let's appreciate him one more time. You're going to find that helpful? Okay. We are highly appreciative. They have given their time so that they can help you. We will inform you if there's any other classes going forward. We will contact your educators. We just like to pray with you before we leave. We have some sandwiches and some stuff if you'd like after you leave on your way out. That's available, so you can just stop by. Okay, we'll pray for you. Father, we thank you for your goodness. Thank you for the wisdom you give to us. Thank you for those who have studied ahead of us and come and pour into us wisdom. Show us ways that help us to find an easier path. We pray for blessings over their life. We pray for every child here. We know that the papers are difficult. There's a lot of stress. But we ask for your peace. We ask for wisdom. We ask for calmness. And we pray for great success in everything they do. Even as they go home, we ask that you will keep them safe on their journey. And may they rise up to be game changers in our country. Amen. 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 Go well, everyone. Go safe. God bless you.